Hi everyone, this is the Effective Animal Advocacy Kickoff Event Talk. Um, this was a presentation given on Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. We also have a recording of that talk, but the audio was a bit quiet, so I thought I'd go ahead and re-record here at home. So this talk is going to be first a presentation about the urgency of animal advocacy and what you can do to help animals. Then I'll transition into talking about what our club actually does, including some of our plans for the semester and a program you can sign up for. Before I start the talk, I do want to give a slight content warning. During some moments of the talk, there will be short descriptions of common examples of abuse to non-human animals and a few suggestive images. However, there are no videos or pictures depicting active animal abuse or slaughter. I've done my best to only include what I think is necessary to understand the importance of animal advocacy, but if you're particularly sensitive to these topics, you're welcome to skip the video to the part where I talk about what our club actually does. Yeah. I'd also like to mention that this talk isn't really about becoming a vegan or vegetarian. I know that many of you watching this video might be vegan or vegetarian based on the responses we got on our interest form, but it certainly isn't necessary to be a part of this organization. The point of our organization is to give students a platform to advocate for animals regardless of what their food choices currently look like. We think that there's a lot you can do for animals besides just going vegan or vegetarian, and I'll talk about many of those things during the talk. With that being said, I was going to say I'll allow a few moments for people to leave, but this is the time for you to skip to the portion of the video where I go into what our club actually does. So, I'd like to start the talk with a thought experiment. Imagine for a moment that the world comes to a complete stop, and you're placed above the planet in the vacuum of space. In this hypothetical scenario, you're told that when you go back to Earth, you'll experience the life of any single animal that's currently alive at random. Maybe you could be an elephant, or an ostrich, or a zebra, or a giraffe. You could be a cat, or a dog, or even another human. We are also animals, after all. If you were to come back to Earth to experience the life as a non-human animal, maybe you wouldn't have the same cognitive abilities, but there is now an incredible amount of research to suggest that non-human animals are sentient. They can experience positive and negative feelings such as pleasure, joy, pain, and distress. These experiences matter to them as individuals. With this important fact in mind, we recognize the importance of animal cruelty and protection laws. If you were one of these non-human animals, you might benefit immensely from having such laws in place. Your suffering could be minimized or prevented. There are laws in every state against cruelty towards animals. If you saw me kicking a dog on the street, for example, you would be appalled. You might intervene or call an animal shelter. There's a very good chance I would even get arrested. But these laws, these anti-cruelty laws, have one giant loophole. They offer far less protection to the animals we use for food. What I might be jailed for doing to a dog, animal farming industries get away with doing to farm animals on a daily basis. In a few states, there are even laws in place to prevent anyone from filming inside of these farms to showcase the conditions these animals are living under. While we might fantasize about living the life of our favorite wild animal or our childhood pet, we must also recognize that in our thought experiment, there's a good chance that we would come back to Earth to experience the life of a farmed animal. Given the amount of cows, sheep, pigs, ducks, and goats that are currently being raised for food, you're just as likely to experience the life of one of these animals as you are to experience the life of a human. You're also about 3 times more likely to experience the life of a chicken raised for meat, the overwhelming majority of whom are factory farmed. This doesn't even touch the number of fish or shellfish that are farmed every year, whose numbers easily reach the trillions. If you're one of the many farmed land animals, you would grow at a painfully explosive rate, often in cramped, dirty, and desolate conditions. You might be condemned to non-stop cycles of pregnancy and birthing, bred to produce more milk or flesh than your body is capable of supporting. If you're one of the many factory farm chickens, the last moments of your life would involve being shackled upside down, electrocuted, sliced by a blade through the neck, and boiled, with some chance that you remain fully alive and conscious until that point. If you're one of the countless fish, the rapid pressure change from being pulled to the ocean's surface in a trawl results in an exploded swim bladder, which is excruciatingly painful. You suffocate as your net is pulled onto the ship, and then you're placed on ice, which prolongs the suffocation, often taking more than 2 hours. Waking up to the idea that our food system is fundamentally broken is an idea that I sometimes like to call the green pill. Once you take the green pill, you see the world differently. You suddenly recognize the urgency of the things you've been taught to ignore, the absolute scale and severity of suffering that we inflict onto non-human animals. You recognize that through animal agriculture, we kill more animals in a single week than the number of humans killed in all wars throughout history. You recognize that these industries have a vested interest in hiding the truth of how these products are produced so that we can continue to buy them. You recognize that a meal that lasts just a matter of minutes, providing us with just moments of pleasure, necessitates the suffering of some animal, suffering that can last for months or even years. Maybe your green pill came in the form of a documentary showcasing animal cruelty on factory farms, or a news report on the environmental harms of animal agriculture. Maybe your green pill was a scientific article describing public health concerns such as the overuse of antibiotics in animal feed, or your green pill was a book like Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. Or maybe it was even a well-placed YouTube recommendation from someone like Earthling Ed or Cosmic Skeptic. I know at least a few of you who are watching have seen their videos based on the conversations I had with you at the org fair. And if you haven't been green pilled yet, you're in for one heck of a ride. One night, while mindlessly scrolling through Reddit, I came across my own green pill. This is a screenshot from a video that showcases the process of chick culling. In the egg industry, male chicks are considered to be useless byproducts. They don't lay eggs, and they don't grow large enough to be profitable for meat production. In the United States, the most common method of chick culling is by sending chicks down a conveyor belt and dropping them into a macerator, tearing their bodies into shreds. I watched this video several times in disbelief. I learned that, worldwide, around 7 billion male chicks are culled every year in the egg industry. It made absolutely no sense to me that something so cruel could be so commonplace. What was even more terrifying is the fact that I had never learned about this process until that point. I knew that in that moment I had to do something to help alleviate the suffering of these animals. What I decided to do that night is commit to following a vegan lifestyle. And even though I never thought I would be saying this, I've been vegan for about 2 years now. Indeed, what the green pill often leads to is individual dietary change or changes in our consumption habits. Animal advocates have told us for decades that to manifest a world that's better for the animals, we must start with changing what we put on our plates. But what I want to convey to you today is that things are much, much more complicated than that. Vegan tabloids will often claim victory for the animals, citing the fact that the number of people adopting a plant-based diet has increased compared to the previous year. But what they conveniently leave out is that global meat production is continuing to increase without much sign of slowing down. And as the wealth of developing nations increases, so does their appetite for meat-heavy diets, a diet previously inaccessible to them due to the profound economical cost and externalities of large-scale animal farming. And in our current organization of the economy that necessitates perpetual growth. It's certainly possible that both the plant-based food industry and the animal agriculture industry can grow at the same time. As much as I hate to admit it, my purchase of cashew cheese at Trader Joe's probably isn't doing much to directly alleviate the suffering of farmed animals. Not only that, but the very notion of what it means to be a vegan is complicated. This is Animal Ingredients A to Z. It's a small handbook with almost 100 pages of ingredients that could potentially be derived from an animal. Of course, as a vegan, I could always bring one of these handbooks with me every time I go to the grocery store. Or I could carry one in my back pocket when I go on a Tinder date. Or instead of doing my computer science homework tonight, I could spend all my time memorizing all those ingredients and chemicals and flavorings in the handbook. But ultimately, will unknowingly purchasing a box of cereal that contains one of these animal byproducts have any tangible effect on animal suffering? Let me remind you that there's a good chance that the glue attaching the carpet beneath your feet to the room that you're in is made from animal byproducts. Does that mean that as a vegan, I should refuse to step in this room today to give this talk? I think not. I want to offer an alternative view of animal advocacy, one that doesn't have to start with what we put on our plates or changing our personal consumption habits. One that instead involves first asking the question, what is the most good I can possibly do for non-human animals given my limited time and resources? In the process of answering this question, maybe we'll change our dietary habits along the way, but we certainly don't want you to feel like it's an absolute necessity to make that change today. If we frame the issue of large-scale animal suffering and exploitation as things that everyone should care about and work to end, rather than something that just vegans or vegetarians should care about, we think that, collectively, we can have a much larger impact, and we can accelerate the transition to a world where animals no longer need to needlessly suffer just for the sake of our appetites. Take the case of chick culling in the egg industry. We already know how to prevent it. Scientists are developing new technologies to determine the sexes of chicks while they're still developing in their eggs, a process known as in ovo sexing. By implementing this process on a commercial scale, we could potentially spare billions of live chicks from the fate of being culled. Instead of being macerated while they're alive, we could dispose of the eggs before the chicks develop inside of them. In fact, just this year, there have been 4 countries, France, Germany, Austria, and Italy, that have begun to implement a complete ban on chick culling, offering subsidies to chicken breeders to implement in ovo sexing machines in the process. It's estimated that once these bans go into full effect, over 100 million fully developed male chicks will be saved from culling every year. It's thanks to the work of scientists, industrial engineers, and public policy officials over the course of the past decade that these changes are finally beginning to be implemented. While the abolition of this practice seems closer than ever before, there's still so much work that needs to be done. The current in ovo sexing method, being phased into hatcheries across European countries, involves the use of machinery that's prohibitively expensive without the use of subsidies. The technology also cannot be used until about after 9 days of incubation. And while this is certainly preferable to culling day-old live chicks who have hatched and been incubated for the complete 21 days, we think we can do even better. There are small teams of researchers around the world investigating alternative methods of in ovo sexing, using technologies like mass spectrometry, MRI, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to help make the process faster, cheaper, and much earlier on in the incubation process. We don't often think of technical or scientific research as a means of improving animal welfare, but now, more than ever before, you can use the skills you develop in these domains to bring about real change in the lives of billions of animals. In addition to the technical problem that needs to be solved, we also need to recognize that this is the importance of this issue becoming a matter of public policy. While we're beginning to see some success in these European countries, issues like these are completely absent from the conversation here in the United States, with no major legislation ever being introduced that calls for the end of this practice. By working in public policy positions for legislators or in effective animal advocacy organizations, we can get closer to abolishing this practice here in the United States as well. Another way to advocate for welfare reform is to negotiate with corporations directly. This is the primary work of the Humane League. They'll approach some of the largest food corporations in the world, like Yum Foods, Sprouts, Whole Foods, and Restaurant Brands International, with a list of welfare reforms that they think should be implemented in their supply chains. More often than not, corporations are willing to respond to this pressure to avoid bad press that could tarnish their brand's image. If, for example, a corporation doesn't come to an agreement or fails to maintain their commitments to improving animal welfare, the Humane League will run an ad campaign exposing the cruelty that goes into producing that corporation's product, which can have a large impact on their sales. Even then, as animal advocates, we also have to come to terms with the fact that not everyone wants to become a vegan or a vegetarian based on the moral arguments for doing so. In fact, there are even some systemic barriers in place that prevent certain groups of people in this country from accessing supermarkets or grocery stores with fresh foods that can be essential to their transition, exacerbated by the fact that animal products are heavily subsidized in this country, while their plant-based alternatives are not. Fortunately, with advancements in food technology, we're beginning to see a future where meat, dairy, and eggs have nothing to do with animal farming at all. Think about it. What is meat? It's just a collection of fat, protein, water, and trace minerals. None of these components have to come from an animal, and, as you might already know, there are excellent plant-based alternatives to animal products that are becoming more abundant. Still, some consumers might be picky, wanting the exact same tastes and textures without any compromise. The goal of the Good Food Institute is to create alternative meat products that cost the same or less and taste the same or better. In addition to advancing the quality of plant-based proteins, they're also investing millions of dollars into cell cultivation and fermentation technologies that can produce products that are completely indistinguishable from what we're familiar with. The Good Food Institute is also particularly keen on involving students in their mission, and are ready to help you find internships, grants, and research opportunities in this space. They believe that the future of the alternative proteins industry starts right here at the university level. So far, they've helped students from many schools to start groups and research projects related to alternative proteins. Recently, they even helped students at Stanford advocate for the implementation of a course on the science and production of alternative proteins. The course has now been taken by hundreds of students and had highly positive feedback. There's a very good chance that at least some of those students have been inspired enough to work in this industry, and now they're equipped with the skills and knowledge to make an impact. Notice that none of the career plans or paths for advocacy I've mentioned so far, whether it was going into technical research, public policy, corporate negotiation, or bleeding-edge food science, none of these paths necessitate that you first become a vegan or a vegetarian. You can have an incredible impact on reducing the suffering of animals in ways beyond just changing your diet. What I want to emphasize is that encouraging individuals to change their consumption habits shouldn't be our end goal. To quote J.C. Rees-Anthis, an animal advocate who studies the effectiveness and sociological patterns of different social movements, virtually no movements, from environmentalism, children's rights, anti-slavery, feminism, to anti-war movements, have succeeded with the heavy individual focus that we sometimes see in the farmed animal movement. Consumer advocacy like boycotts have succeeded when used as tools for institutional change, but failed when treated as an end goal. We need to learn from the past." End quote. I think fundamentally, the project of animal advocacy should be to abolish all the needless suffering of non-human animals. And if we treat veganism as our end goal rather than the abolition of all animal suffering, we might fail in our moral obligations to non-human animals in other ways. Think back to the thought experiment from the beginning of this talk. If you had to come back to Earth to experience the life of any one animal at random, there's an even larger chance that you would be one of several small wild animals. The scope is so immense it's hard to imagine, and despite the idyllic views of nature, sometimes perpetuated by the media, these wild animals don't often live under ideal conditions. Many wild animals suffer from hunger, thirst, predation, and disease. Just because we aren't directly responsible for their suffering, should that mean that we aren't obligated to help them? We could potentially help animals in these situations through interventions like vaccination programs and designing their environments in a way that provides more adequate nutrition and less threat from predation. And what about all those insects? What do their conscious experiences look like? And are there things we can do to help them as well? Organizations like Wild Animal Initiative and Animal Ethics think that these are important questions worth answering. And their primary goal is to research the implications of helping animals in the wild and promoting the field of welfare biology, an alternative to conservation biology that focuses more heavily on ensuring that the conscious experiences of wild animals are positive. Despite the many unfortunate circumstances I had to describe to you today, I remain optimistic. This is a time of opportunity. Now, more than ever before, the moral arguments for ending animal suffering are getting stronger and more difficult to ignore. Our technological capacities to help animals are more profound, and animal advocates are using more effective strategies to help spread the message and create change. I remain optimistic because for the first time in human history, we're beginning a moral revolution in which those being oppressed cannot speak up for themselves, instead having to rely on their oppressors to advocate for them. This speaks volumes to the moral progress we're making as a society. The animal advocacy movement has come a long way, but in many other ways, we're only getting started. Together, we can create a world without any needless animal suffering, a world in which we can be confident that no matter which sentient being on the planet we're thinking of, we can guarantee that their life experiences are positive. I hope you'll join us in that mission. Thank you. Yay. Okay, so that was the talk, and thank you for listening to that. So now I'm going to talk a little bit informally about what our club actually does. So our main programming is the Animal Ethics Fellowship. I heard at the event that this QR code doesn't actually work, so I'll leave a link in the description of this video to where you can apply to this program. It's kind of like a reading group in the sense that you're going to be assigned some readings every week that will take you anywhere between an hour to an hour and a half. And then you'll come to discussion and we'll talk about these ideas and discuss some of their implications. This is also a really great opportunity if you're interested in a career in animal advocacy in the future. And the deadline to apply for the fellowship is on Thursday, September 29th, so be sure to do that. And on a much lighter note, we're also organizing a trip to Madison Vegan Fest, and that's on Saturday, October 1st. And in the future, we'll also be planning more dinners and socials, planning a trip to a farmed animal sanctuary. So yeah, definitely keep up with your inbox, keep up with the GroupMe, and I'll see you guys around. Thank you.